when I told my friends that I spend probably half my life in a daydream, like I'd mentioned this, I think, briefly to them, they're just like, there's no way. How could you even do that? And I'm like, pretty easy, actually.
If it's just like a normal day, maybe like 4 or 5 hours.
Most of my day, to be honest. So from when I wake up to usually when I go to sleep.
It's just time goes by, man. It's just literally I have to say the whole day.
In the beginning of the millennium, I noticed that a significant portion of my cohort of patients that I was treating were insinuating that they have an inner world, that they have a separation of their consciousness, that part of it is related to external reality, but they also have a more secretive, covert inner world in which they like to spend a lot of time in. Because there were a number of such patients, not just one, it really caught my attention. I did a quick literature search, found nothing about this kind of extensive daydreaming, and I decided to describe it in a little clinical paper. The response was silence from the scientific community, and it raised no interest. And so I waited for some emails, some interaction, some follow-up articles and so. But since nothing happened, to the best of my knowledge at that point, I just dropped it. At that time, when there was this silence, and maybe even before, people were Googling, extensive daydreaming, compulsive daydreaming, these terms. And somehow Google referred them to this little article. So what started happening after, I would say, 2-3 years, I started getting some emails. First, a few, then a trickle, then a more substantial amount of emails arrived, and it increased and increased to become a deluge, a barrage of emails. We're now 17 years later. Not a week passes that I don't get 2-3 emails from people around the globe who have found this article, and now others, and asking for help, asking for advice. I believe that people with this condition have a trait that most individuals out there don't have. And the trait consists of the ability to be fully immersed in the daydream. The daydreaming can be very fanciful and fantastical in nature. So, in contrary to normal daydreaming, we're talking about stories that have nothing to do with reality. If it has something to do with reality, it is perhaps an idealized version of reality.
With TV and books, I fantasize a lot. So I kind of, when I watch TV, I get warped in.
I liked reading about Greek mythology, but I also like Chinese folklore. So I kind of combined the essence of those two things to also add to my own world as well.
There's sci-fi, but there's also like fantasy elements in it.
There are two issues that seem to be important to many people with this form of fantasy life. One is movement. We don't understand why is that, but this is a repeated report that we hear, that people, in order to trigger the daydreaming or to sustain it, they must pace or rock or swing or do some other kind of manual, repetitive, stereotypical movement. That's one characteristic that sets it apart.
Like if it's like really intense, I'll like pace back and forth. Sometimes I'll like run into the walls and stuff.
So it's pacing around just my living room because that's the widest room we have.
Because if you're sitting down perfectly still, imagining a battle scene, you feel like it's not as intense as it should be. You feel
And music is also reported to be very important. So a lot of these extensive daydreamers tell me that in order to set the mood, they choose a music score, not unlike cinematographers. Music score that to accentuate the kind of feelings, to be evocative, to help them set the emotional tone of their experience. So music is also important.
It started with just walking, listening to music, and then just looking at the stars, and then just daydreaming.
Music is definitely like a big, huge trigger for me.
I almost can't do it without it. I mean, I could, but like, I almost need it.
For me, what I do is I put on some music, put my headphones in, and I walk around the property of my home for like hours.
Because this inner experience feels so real to them, it is, so I'm told, as good as reality. So rather than perhaps working hard in real life or in therapy to change, they have this compensatory experience in their mind. And it's luring. It's very tempting to be there. Of course, waking up from this fantasy, coming to the reality that is so different from the idealized situation can be not only startling but depressing. And to help themselves cope with this depression, they fantasize more.
It's like, you're fantasizing, you just get so used to it, and then when you get out of it, like when I do, I want to go back.
I don't know how other people get control over it, but I have a really bad problem with it.
It's like a drug, and like everybody in real life, they want to get off of a drug. I mean, it looks pretty on paper, but like trying to stop is one thing. But it's more than just that, because for one thing, you have an unlimited supply, because you can't just shut off your brain.
Now you might ask, so why is that bad? I mean, couldn't that be another alternative form of being, without us being judgmental and having to pathologize it? So to that end, I would suggest using the criteria of psychopathology as adopted, for example, by the DSM. Does this condition create any sort of dysfunction or impairment of an important area of life? So if your fantasy interferes with the quality of your studies, interferes with your dedication to work, or with your social life, then it qualifies as a disorder.
I want to do like more real life stuff. I mean, I don't want that to be my life, but I don't know, it kind of is.
This is something that's probably going to be with me for the rest of my life, is how I feel right now, even though I'm snapping out of it, or trying to at least. It's had a major impact.
Part of me at the same time wants to be able to be a normal person, have a good life, but another part of me just doesn't care and just wants to sink deeper into the daydream until I no longer have to come back.
Our goal is just to help people control it better, but never. I mean, it's like an eating disorder. You can't have people stop eating. We just need to teach them how to do it in moderation, so they can sustain their bodies and enjoy their meals, but not damage their organism. So now all I'm doing is trying to help this community out there get a name for their condition and develop a treatment protocol, develop diagnostic criteria, and hopefully have other research groups in other parts of the world continue to collect information about this condition that apparently was out there. It's not something that was born in this millennium, but I think that it requires specialized treatment, and we need to develop this special techniques to help them.